So, imagine you're standing on the precipice of this massive personal transformation. You're right at the edge of this vast, completely unmapped territory.
A really intimidating place to be.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like perhaps you are finally trying to break this endless cycle of a bad habit that has just haunted you for an absolute age. Or maybe, you're stepping into an entirely new chapter of life, a new vocation, a new level of emotional health, just a completely new way of carrying yourself.
Right, you're stepping into the unknown.
Exactly. And you've made the conscious decision to change. You feel completely prepared. You've got your internal compass set, right?
You're ready.
Yeah. You take a deep breath. You lift your foot to take that monumental first step forward.
And then the resistance strikes. And it is almost never what you expect it to be.
Never. It's not like a clean, noble challenge. Suddenly, this invisible resistance strikes, and it just feels entirely chaotic. Just as you are about to step forward, everything goes completely awry.
The wheels just fall off.
Totally. Like an unexpected, fiery argument erupts out of absolutely nowhere with someone you love. Or this sudden, crushing wave of exhaustion just hits you and pins you to your bed.
Or the mundane stuff.
Yes. The inexplicable, absurd string of friction. The vehicle breaks down, the plumbing leaks, the crucial communication gets completely lost in the ether.
I actually have to admit, I failed this exact test just a short time ago.
Really?
Yeah, I was about to walk into this major meeting where I was supposed to embody this new, confident, unshakable version of myself. And like 5 minutes before, I spilled scalding coffee all over my shirt.
Oh no, the classic sabotage.
Right. And instead of maintaining my composure, I threw a complete unapologetic adult temper tantrum right there in the middle of the kitchen.
It happens to the best of us.
It does, but it brings up this intense, burning frustration, Why does it feel as though an invisible tether is violently yanking you backward just as you try to evolve?
Well, what is truly fascinating here is that your feeling of it being personal is actually incredibly accurate.
Wait, it is personal. It is, but not in the way the overwhelming majority of humanity assumes. When you experience that violent yanking backward, it's very easy to look at the external world and think, the cosmos is somehow conspiring against your growth.
Right, like the universe is just out to get me.
Exactly. But we need to reframe this universal frustration entirely. This is not a string of random coincidences. What you are experiencing is a metaphysical game of chess, played out on a biological and psychological board.
A metaphysical game of chess. Okay, let's unpack this because I want to be incredibly precise in our exploration today. Who or what exactly are we playing against?
We're playing against an architecture that you yourself have built over a vast expanse of time.
I built it.
You did. And the goal of our conversation today is to map out the inner architecture of reality and uncover a rather profound, honestly almost unsettling truth.
Okay, I'm bracing myself.
The old version of you, the one you were desperately trying to leave behind, is not just a passive memory stored away in some mental archive. It is an active, blind intelligence that is viciously fighting for its own survival.
Wow. An active, blind intelligence.
Yes. Today, we are going to map out exactly how to outsmart this phantom of your past.
I really appreciate that framing, honestly, because it validates the sheer weight of the struggle. It means, you aren't losing your mind when you feel like something is actively plotting against your success.
Exactly. You're not crazy.
But I do want to push back immediately because terms like blind intelligence and phantom of your past can sound dangerously close to pure mysticism.
Sure, they can sound a bit esoteric.
Right. So how do we begin to understand this force mechanically? Where does it actually come from?
To understand the phantom, we first have to understand the soil from which it grows. And that requires introducing a foundational law of our existence.
Which is?
The cosmos is entirely mental. Before anything can take a physical shape in your reality, it must first exist as a vibrational blueprint. Everything that materializes in your world is the downstream result of an internal state.
Hold on, let me stop you right there. Because vibrational blueprint is one of those phrases that sounds beautiful, but often lacks a concrete foundation for people,
Fair point.
Are we talking about like electromagnetic frequencies in the brain, beta and theta waves? We really have to ground this. Explain the actual mechanics of an internal vibration shifting physical matter. Because otherwise, it just sounds like we're telling people to wish upon a star.
And that is a crucial distinction to demand. So let's strip away the mysticism entirely and look at the neuroscience and cognitive psychology of this.
Please.
When we speak of a vibrational blueprint, we are talking about the literal physical structuring of your neural networks, and the chemical baseline of your body.
Okay, so actual biology.
Exactly. The human brain is an adaptation machine. Every thought you have is an electrical impulse. When a thought is repeated, the neurons associated with that thought fire together.
Firing together, wiring together.
Precisely. Over a vast span of time, they wire together, creating these incredibly dense, highly efficient pathways. The brain literally coats these pathways in a substance called myelin,
Myelin, right.
which acts like insulation on a copper wire, making that specific electrical signal travel exponentially faster.
So a blueprint isn't some magical aura floating around you. It's a hardened neural highway in your physical brain.
Yes, that's exactly it. But here's the critical part that trips up a vast multitude of people trying to change their lives. Cold, sterile thoughts alone are practically inert.
What do you mean by cold thoughts?
Like repeating positive affirmations like a robot. I am successful. I am calm.
They get trapped in this endless cycle of mental gymnastics, trying to constantly police their surface-level thoughts.
Oh, I've been there.
Right.
Just chanting affirmations in the mirror while feeling absolutely miserable inside.
Right. And it doesn't work. Because the true architecture of reality requires a specific alchemy. It requires the fusion of thought and emotion.
Emotion. Energy in motion.
Exactly. So how does emotion actually change that neurological blueprint we were just talking about?
Emotion is the absolute largest shareholder of your energetic signature. It holds the ultimate voting power. From a biological standpoint, an emotion is a chemical cocktail.
A flood of neuropeptides and hormones, right?
Yes, released straight into the bloodstream. A thought is merely a directional impulse, but the emotion is the velocity, the mass, and the chemical glue behind it.
Okay, I see.
When your amygdala, the emotional processing center of the brain, stamps a thought with a high degree of emotional intensity, it signals to your entire nervous system. This is a matter of absolute survival. Remember this.
Wow. So if I have a fleeting, sterile thought of success, but an overwhelming, deeply rooted emotional state of panic and unworthiness.
The entire biological system responds to the dominant shareholder. It responds to the panic.
That makes so much sense. I want to replace an old cliche here if I can.
Go for it.
We hear all the time that repeated thoughts are like water carving stone. But based on what you're saying, it's much more structural and modern than that. It's like legacy code in a computer software system.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Right. You're trying to run a brand new operating system, the new you, but deep in the registry, there's this ancient line of code that dictates if vulnerability is detected, shut down the entire system to prevent a catastrophic crash.
Yes, exactly.
Your conscious mind is trying to open a new application, but your nervous system is executing a hard reboot based on an outdated emotional program.
That is a flawless metaphor. And what happens when that legacy code has been running constantly over an endless tide of cycles?
It just becomes the default, I assume.
More than just the default. The momentum of those emotionally charged thought forms doesn't just dissipate. The neural pathways are thick. The body's cellular receptors have become chemically addicted to the specific emotional cocktails, usually stress hormones like cortisol, that the legacy code produces.
Chemically addicted to our own stress. That's
Wow.
wild.
It is. And all of those repeated thought forms eventually coalesce into a solid, autonomous structure within your subconscious.
And this brings us to the core of the invisible tether. This coalesced structure, this deeply entrenched web of neural legacy code, becomes something more than just a bad habit.
Yes. And this is the objective truth that can be deeply unsettling at first. This coalesced structure becomes a localized field of consciousness. It operates with a unified purpose. This is the phantom self.
But you called it a blind intelligence earlier. Let's define that, because I want to be clear. It's not some evil demon sitting on my shoulder plotting my ruin because it hates me.
No, not at all. It does not possess profound malice towards you. It operates entirely as a blind intelligence, like an artificial intelligence that has been programmed with a single directive, completely oblivious to anything outside of its original parameters.
So it's just following its programming.
Precisely. It was born entirely from your past frequencies, your past worries, your past financial struggles, your relational conflicts, the paradigms of scarcity you inhabited for a vast era of your life.
I breathed life into it with my own emotional intensity.
You did. And now that it exists, its prime directive, its absolute sole purpose for being is simply to survive.
Okay, so how does a thought entity, a network of legacy code, actually survive?
By keeping you anchored to the exact paradigm that created it. It needs you to continue emitting the specific chemical and electrical frequencies of your past so that its pathways remain active.
Because if they aren't active...
In neurology, there's a process called synaptic pruning. If a neural pathway isn't used, the brain identifies it as unnecessary and dismantles it to conserve energy.
Oh, wow. So the phantom self is terrified of synaptic pruning.
Terrified of it. If you shift your frequency to a new, elevated state, the environment that sustains the phantom just disappears. It starves. It faces biological and metaphysical death.
So it fights back.
It fights blindly, instinctually to drag you back to the old frequency to ensure its own continuity.
This fundamentally changes the conversation around self-sabotage because we endlessly berate ourselves, right? Asking, why am I so weak? Why do I intentionally ruin good things?
It's a heavy burden of guilt people carry.
Yeah. But what you're outlining is a mechanical, structural reason for this resistance. It's not a moral failing on my part. It's a direct encounter with an autonomous, energetic, and biological structure that is simply trying not to be dismantled.
Precisely. Which raises the most vital question of our analysis. If this phantom is an energetic structure desperately trying to survive, what exactly is its food source? What does it consume to stay alive?
That is the perfect pivot to the first defining characteristic of this old self. It's insatiable, relentless neediness. This entity is absolutely starved for your focus, isn't it?
It is entirely dependent on it.
Because it operates on a very ancient principle. Where attention goes, energy flows.
Attention is the absolute currency of this realm. And a vast constellation of people think of attention as passive observation.
Like just watching a movie.
Right. They believe they are simply looking at a problem or merely noticing a passing annoyance. But attention is highly active. Attention is a concentrated beam of life force.
It's the literal mechanism by which we allocate our biological and energetic resources.
Let's ground this again in the mechanics of the mind. The human brain processes an overwhelming, incalculable tide of data bits every single second. But your conscious awareness can only process a minuscule fraction of that.
So it has to filter it.
Exactly. To manage this, your brain uses a filter called the reticular activating system. This system decides what gets ignored and what gets elevated to your conscious attention.
And what programs that filter?
Your past emotional states and your focused attention. When you direct your attention toward the circumstances of your old reality, you are programming the filter to find more of that reality.
We're channeling your raw, creative life force right back into the old structure, actively keeping it ignited.
Yes, you're literally feeding the phantom.
Okay, I have a major observation for the listener here. Because if attention is our most valuable currency, if it's the literal lifeblood that fuels the architecture of our reality and wires our neural pathways, then we are facing a massive systemic crisis.
We truly are.
Because the overwhelming majority of us spend our attention incredibly recklessly without ever demanding a return on that expenditure.
That's a great way to put it. Reckless spending.
Right. We throw our focus at every petty grievance, every passing annoyance, every dramatic headline, every minor interpersonal conflict. We treat our attention as if it's this infinite, completely worthless resource.
And the blind intelligence relies entirely on your recklessness. It requires you to squander your focus.
So we have to transition from a mindset of spending attention to a mindset of investing it. When you invest currency, you demand a tangible return. You calculate the trajectory.
You expect the yield.
Exactly. You ask, is this investment going to yield the future reality I desire? And if the answer is no, you withhold the capital.
But that requires an extraordinary level of discipline, especially because the old self is actively scheming to steal that investment from you.
Scheming how?
Well, it knows you want to invest in your new reality, so it orchestrates manufactured crises to forcefully extract your attention.
Manufactured crises. Okay, now, I have to push back hard here.
I expect nothing less.
I understand the psychology of the reticular activating system filtering reality, but you are saying the phantom actually orchestrates crises. Are you implying that my internal legacy code magically unscrews the plumbing in my house? Or causes another driver to randomly cut me off in traffic?
It sounds a bit far-fetched when you put it like that.
Because that crosses the line from psychology back into, like, magical thinking. My vehicle's engine doesn't care about my emotional state.
And that is the exact skepticism we need to bring to this. So let's examine how a manufactured crisis operates without violating the laws of physics. It operates through two primary mechanisms: perception and unconscious microaction.
Okay, let's break those down. First, perception.
Because your internal filter is desperate for the old reality, it will take a completely neutral external event, say a delayed response to an email or a slightly ambiguous tone of voice from a partner, and it will instantly interpret it as a catastrophic targeted attack.
Oh, I see. The crisis is manufactured in the interpretation itself.
Exactly. The external event was a minor blip. Your legacy code inflated into an emergency simply to extract your emotional attention.
So it turns a molehill into a mountain because the mountain generates the stress hormones it feeds on.
That's the first mechanism. The second mechanism is unconscious microaction. You have to remember, you are an energetic transmitter. Your body language, your microexpressions, the tone and cadence of your voice all broadcast your internal state.
We leak our emotions all over the place.
We do. If your legacy code is creating conflict, you will unconsciously adopt a defensive posture. You will speak with a sharp edge. You will drive aggressively. You project a frequency of friction, and the external world responds in kind.
Wow.
The person in traffic cuts you off because your erratic microactions disrupted the flow of the road. Your partner picks a fight because your body language has been screaming hostility for hours.
So you manufactured the crisis through 1,000 tiny, unconscious behaviors designed to provoke the exact friction the phantom needs to feed.
You did. It specializes in the mundane but highly triggering.
That is brilliant and terrifying. So you wake up feeling aligned, ready to embrace a new paradigm of abundance and peace. You step out the door, and immediately, a minor inconvenience occurs. But because of this mechanism, it feels monumental.
And what is the immediate instinct most people have? To look at those things and say, well, that is just bad luck. That is just life happening to me. The universe is telling me today is not my day.
But it's not just life happening. It's the blind intelligence throwing bait. It is designed specifically to frustrate you. Frustration is the key mechanism here, isn't it?
It is the primary tool.
Why frustration specifically? Like, why not profound grief or abject terror in these micro moments?
Because frustration acts as a highly effective adhesive. It is vibrational glue. When you are deeply frustrated, your attention narrows to a pinpoint.
You get tunnel vision.
Exactly. You become hyper-fixated on the perceived unfairness of the situation.
Yeah.
You replay the minor argument in your head a dozen times. You fume over the email.
After chewing on it endlessly.
Yeah. And in that state of intense, centralized focus, fueled by the emotion of annoyance, your brain is actively strengthening the neural pathways of the old paradigm. You are trapped in an endless loop, providing the phantom with a massive infusion of the exact chemical nourishment it needs to survive the day.
So when a nuisance suddenly demands your focus and you feel that familiar spike of hot frustration, it's not just a random bad moment, it's an alarm bell.
A blaring siren.
It's signaling that the phantom self is starving, and it has just banged its spoon on the high chair, demanding to be fed.
That is precisely what it is. And the moment you recognize it as an orchestrated feeding attempt rather than a genuine emergency, you reclaim your sovereignty.
You just see right through it.
You can look at the sudden traffic jam or the passive-aggressive comment and realize, this is the legacy code attempting to extract my attention currency. And you can simply choose to withhold the investment.
You withdraw the focus.
The neural pathway weakens and the fire begins to starve.
That is incredibly empowering. But it also leads me to a darker observation about this architecture. This unseen tether often feels intensely cruel. If this entity is made of my own past energy and neurology, why does it seem to thrive specifically on suffering?
It's a common question.
Why does this internal force orchestrate scenarios that cause us genuine distress and negativity?
What is vital to understand here is the absolute neutrality of the biological and energetic systems, even when they appear cruel. As humans, we project morality onto these functions.
We label things as good or bad.
Right. We categorize joy as good and anxiety as bad. But the blind intelligence, the legacy code, does not understand human morality. It does not know right from wrong. It only understands resonance and familiarity.
It only knows what it has been programmed to sustain.
Yes, it's just a biological machine executing its loop. We have to look at the objective reality of how the phantom was formed. If your past eras, the long chapters of your life that created this entity, were defined by a magnitude of struggle, immense scarcity, deep unworthiness, or constant relational conflict.
Then those are the building blocks.
Exactly. Those dense negative states are the very substance the old self is constructed from. Its cellular makeup is composed of worry. Its structural integrity relies on the presence of stress hormones.
So it's not being malicious by demanding suffering. It's just demanding the atmosphere it needs to breathe.
That is the core of it. It thrives on negativity because negativity is its native atmosphere.
So like a deep sea creature.
Right. That's a perfect analogy. A creature that lives in the crushing depths of the ocean does not consider the extreme pressure to be oppressive. The pressure is the only thing keeping its physical form intact.
If you bring it up to the surface.
The lack of pressure destroys it. It literally falls apart. For the old self, chaos, pain, and frustration are the crushing pressure it needs to sustain its form.
This is a massive paradigm shift, because when everything is going wrong, it feels like a punishment. It feels like we're failing at life. But what you're saying is that the chaos is actually an environment matching mechanism.
To ensure its survival, the blind intelligence will continually attempt to recreate circumstances that perfectly match its native atmosphere. It cannot survive and profound joy.
That environment is toxic to its survival.
The brain literally does not have the well-worn pathways to process that sustained peace. It feels unfamiliar, and to the primitive brain, unfamiliar means dangerous.
So when you start creating a life of peace,
The legacy code starts suffocating. To save itself, it begins stacking triggering events upon you to extract an emotional reaction that will pollute the atmosphere back to its preferred level of toxicity.
it wants to pull the emotional fire alarm and fill the room with smoke because it breathes smoke.
Exactly.
Let's make this concrete. I want to tell a story about an archetype we see all the time. Let's call him the builder.
Okay, the builder?
The builder has spent an entire era of his life steeped in financial panic and toxic business partnerships. His entire nervous system is wired for betrayal and crisis. Finally, he steps into a new chapter. He starts a new venture with incredibly supportive, healthy partners. The business is thriving. The atmosphere is peaceful. What happens next?
The builder's nervous system begins to experience withdrawal. The lack of cortisol feels alarming. The phantom self is suffocating in the clean air of collaboration.
Exactly. So out of nowhere, the builder starts finding these imperceptible flaws in his partner's work. He starts reading malicious intent into completely innocent emails.
He's looking for the smoke.
Yes. He manufactures a massive conflict over a minor accounting error. He screams, he panics, he threatens to dissolve the company, he burns the bridge, and suddenly he is back in crisis. He is back in the smoke.
And in that moment of crisis, as destructive as it is, what does his body feel?
Probably relief, right?
A profound, perverse sense of relief. The familiar stress hormones flood his system. The neural pathways of betrayal light up. The phantom takes a deep breath of its native atmosphere. He has successfully realigned his vibration with the old reality.
Okay, so knowing this devastating mechanism, I want to challenge the listener to fundamentally rethink a very popular concept in the cultural zeitgeist. We hear all the time about fighting your demons.
Well, yes, very common phrasing.
People proudly declare, I am battling my inner demons today, or I am going to war with my past. But if we apply the mechanics we're discussing, combat is the absolute worst strategy imaginable.
Combat is a profound trap. Because what is the energetic and biological frequency of combat?
It's resistance, it's struggle, it's anger, tension.
Precisely. Combat implies a matching of frequencies. If you go to war with your old self, you are generating massive amounts of frustration, anger, and forceful exertion. You are feeding the phantom the exact dense emotional energy it requires to thrive.
You're just giving it a feast.
You are wrestling a pig in the mud. The pig loves it because mud is its native environment, and you just become exhausted and covered in the very substance you were trying to escape.
So instead of fighting, what is the alternative? How do you actually dismantle an architecture you are not allowed to attack?
The solution is profound, detached observation. True internal purification requires a radical shift in perspective, moving from the primitive reactive brain into the higher executive functions.
So stepping out of the mud entirely.
Yes. When the trigger arises, when the manufactured crisis hits, and the urge to descend into rage or despair washes over you, you do not fight the urge. You do not suppress it violently. You step back and observe it.
You recognize the trigger not as a genuine threat in the present moment,
but as a desperate, dying plea from the phantom of your past.
You look at it like a temper tantrum from an exhausted child in a grocery store. You don't engage in a screaming match with the child. You just watch them tire themselves out.
You observe the mechanism. This is deeply grounded in cognitive psychology. It is a process known as affect labeling.
Affect labeling?
By simply observing and naming the emotion, saying, I am experiencing a surge of panic rather than I am panicking, You shift the electrical activity away from the emotional center, the amygdala, and redirect it into the prefrontal cortex, the center of logic and observation.
You depersonalize it.
You say, I see the circumstance. I feel the attempt to pull my emotional energy. I recognize this as the legacy code seeking its native atmosphere. I decline the invitation.
I decline the invitation. That is a magnificent posture to hold. But declining that invitation is incredibly difficult because we are biologically wired to react instantly, aren't we?
We absolutely are.
Which shifts our analysis to the third major characteristic of the phantom self, reactivity.
This is perhaps the most deeply ingrained hurdle of the human experience. The vast multitude of humanity operates in a perpetual state of reactive consciousness.
It's exhausting just to think about.
They allow immediate visual, physical, and auditory stimuli to completely hijack their internal emotional state.
Yeah.
If they receive validation, they are euphoric. If they receive criticism, they are devastated. Their internal world is an absolute slave to external inputs.
They are living entirely by physical sight.
Living entirely by physical sight means completely ignoring the higher sovereign faculty of what we might call mind sight.
Mind sight. I like that.
Mind sight is the ability to perceive the underlying mechanics of reality beyond the immediate physical illusions of space, time, and conflict. It's the ability to see the architecture of the chessboard rather than just panicking over the single piece moving towards you.
In previous discussions of human behavior, people often use the analogy of a deer reacting to a snapping twig in the forest.
Right, pure instinct.
The deer hears a sound, its higher cognitive functions shut down, and it darts wildly in raw survival impulse. But I want to modernize that because we aren't grazing in forests.
Yeah.
Let's look at it like an automated digital system.
Okay, I'm following.
Your reactive consciousness is like an overzealous spam filter on an email server. An incredibly important, life-changing email comes in, an opportunity for growth. But because the sender's address has a single character that resembles a past threat, the automated system bypasses all logic, flags it as a virus, and throws it immediately into the incinerator.
That is exactly how it functions.
The legacy code wants you operating like that automated filter.
It wants to act like the trigger. It wants to push an emotional button, an unexpected financial hurdle, a critical comment from a superior, and watch you react instantly, bypassing your prefrontal cortex entirely. It wants you darting wildly into anxiety before you even have a chance to consult your mind sight.
Because the moment you react impulsively, you have abdicated your sovereignty.
The instant reaction is always governed by the old programming. The old programming dictates that an unexpected delay means absolute ruin. The impulse reaction connects the external trigger directly to the old, deep reservoir of fear.
Bypassing logic.
You bypass logic entirely and flood your system with the exact chemicals the phantom needs.
So what is the antidote to this biological and digital hijacking? How do we stop being the automated spam filter? How do we regain manual control?
The antidote is the cultivation of a space between stimulus and response. It is the profound discipline of the pause, emotional and mental patience.
The pause. It sounds deceptively simple, but anyone who has tried it knows it feels like trying to stop a freight train with your bare hands.
It is the hardest internal labor you will ever undertake. When reality throws an obstacle onto your path, when the trigger hits, you must cultivate the monumental discipline to freeze.
Just freeze.
You do not react. You do not immediately invest your emotional currency. You stand still and you allow the initial surge of chemical panic to wash through your nervous system without taking action based upon it.
You breathe through the impulse. You hold your ground while the cortisol spikes and recedes. You are literally buying time for the higher brain functions to boot up.
Exactly. You are creating a neuroplastic delay.
Yeah.
In that pause, you activate your mind sight. You rise above the immediate illusion of the threat. You evaluate the board.
You see the bigger picture.
You realize this is not an existential threat. This is merely a circumstance designed to extract my attention and lower my frequency. By extending the time between the event and your emotional investment, you cut the wire to the explosive. The bomb is diffused. The neural pathway of the old reaction weakens just a little bit more.
And this leads to a piercing question I want to pose to everyone navigating this right now. A question that puts the entire pursuit of personal transformation into harsh perspective.
It's an important question.
We all want the fabric of reality to submit to our desires, right? We desire the abundant vocation, the profound physical vitality, the deeply harmonious relationship. But let's look at the logic here. Why should the external fabric of reality submit to your desires if you cannot even command your own internal reactions?
That is the ultimate unyielding mirror. The universe is reflective, not dictatorial.
If you are entirely at the mercy of a traffic jam, or a stray, careless comment, or a delayed flight, if those tiny, insignificant external variables can completely dictate your internal weather, how can you possibly expect to govern the massive forces of manifestation?
You can't.
True sovereignty means that the external world no longer has the power to dictate your internal state. You generate your own weather.
This is a beautiful transition because once you master the pause, once you cease feeding the phantom your frustration, and once you detach from the sadistic feedback loop, something incredible begins to happen on a structural level.
A real biological shift.
The old neural pathways begin to undergo apoptosis. They begin to physically wither. You start to starve the entity. And as it starves, it realizes its existence is coming to a definitive end. Which brings us to its final, most dangerous, and most elusive maneuver.
The projection of fear.
The extinction threat. Imagine the trajectory. You have successfully navigated the daily frustrations. You have maintained your equilibrium through the manufactured crises. You are no longer reacting like an automated survival machine.
You're doing the work.
You are moving closer and closer to that precipice, ready to step into your entirely new state of being. The old self, this coalesced structure of legacy code, looks at this trajectory and faces its absolute dissolution. It realizes it is going offline permanently. It is going to perish.
It's facing a literal ego death. The structure is collapsing.
And in its final moments, facing its own non-existence, this blind intelligence experiences profound, overwhelming terror. It is sending out massive distress signals. The amygdala is firing at maximum capacity because it equates the unknown with death.
But because it is a part of our own internal architecture, we feel that panic in our own bodies, don't we?
Yeah.
This is the grand trick, the metaphysical sleight of hand.
The ultimate illusion.
The old self takes its own terror of non-existence and projects it directly onto the conscious mind.
This is the exact threshold where a vast constellation of people falter, right on the very edge of victory. They experience what psychologists call intense cognitive dissonance, but they misinterpret the signal.
Suddenly, you are standing there, about to take the leap into a magnificent new chapter. Maybe you're about to sign the contract on a revolutionary venture, or commit completely to a healthy, loving partner after eras of toxicity, or release a deeply vulnerable, creative project into the world.
Stakes are high.
And out of nowhere, you feel paralyzed by a sudden, inexplicable, suffocating dread. A physical weight on your chest. You think, what if this is a catastrophic mistake? What if I fail spectacularly? What if this ruins everything I have?
And because the individual lacks the mindsight to see the separation between their true, evolving consciousness and the dying phantom, they mistakenly believe the fear is theirs.
They own it.
They think, I am feeling deeply afraid, therefore this new path must be inherently dangerous. They use the projected fear as an intuitive compass, assuming it is warning them of a genuine external threat.
We internalize it entirely. We take ownership of the legacy code's death rattle. We mistake the panic of the old system shutting down for a warning that the new system is flawed.
And if we connect this to the broader laws of reality creation, the cycle of self-sabotage clicks perfectly, devastatingly into place. By internalizing that fear, you make it your dominant frequency once again.
Your emotional shareholder suddenly shifts.
It shifts from anticipation and expansion back to absolute terror.
And what happens mechanically when terror reclaims its position as the dominant frequency?
The nervous system and the energetic field respond to the new blueprint. That internalized fear becomes a massive beacon. The reticular activating system recalibrates. It begins seeking out and materializing new, tangible circumstances in your physical reality that give you a highly logical, justifiable reason to be afraid.
It essentially creates the monster under the bed to justify the fear you are feeling.
Exactly. Because you adopted the fear, your reality must rearrange itself to validate that fear. The brain hates cognitive dissonance. It wants the external world to match the internal feeling.
This is why we see this phenomenon universally.
We see it everywhere. Individuals will inexplicably sabotage perfectly harmonious, deeply loving relationships by picking imaginary, unresolvable fights right when intimacy deepens to an unprecedented level.
Or they will entirely squander monumental career opportunities by missing crucial, obvious deadlines.
Or suddenly deciding they are unqualified. Right before a massive breakthrough, they retreat back to the safety, the familiar toxicity, the known pressure of the old paradigm, and the phantom breathes a massive sigh of relief. The neural pathways rethicken, it lives another day.
That is utterly tragic, but so incredibly common. I've seen it in myself, I've seen it in peers. We mistake the resistance of the old self for the intuition of our true self. But knowing this mechanism, mapping out this architecture, is the key to flipping the board entirely. This is the ultimate triumph for you, the listener.
How do we instruct them to flip the board in that critical moment?
The moment you stand on that precipice and feel that paralyzing, irrational fear right before taking a leap into your expansion, you must recognize its true origin. You do not fight it, you do not try to logic your way out of it, and you certainly do not obey it.
You observe it.
You look at that suffocating dread, you feel the physical weight of it, and you realize with absolute surgical clarity, this is not my fear. This is the old frequency terrified of its own end. This is the legacy code panicking because it is about to be deleted. This is the ghost realizing it is about to be exorcised.
The conscious externalization of the fear. The profound realization that you are the sovereign observer of the panic, not the creator of it. You decouple your identity from the biological reaction.
The moment you externalize that fear, the moment you say, I see you, I feel your panic, but you are not me, the scales tip entirely. You stop internalizing the vibration. The beacon is shut off.
The chemical flood stops.
The metaphysical chess match is won. You take the physical step forward, the phantom dissolves into the ether, the old neural pathways collapse, and you arrive in your new reality.
It is a profound structural dissolution. And the relief that follows that step, the moment the old architecture finally collapses, is indescribable. It is the sensation of an immense gravity finally letting go.
Okay, let us weave this entire overarching narrative together. What we've uncovered today is a masterclass in internal architecture. You are not at the mercy of an arbitrary, chaotic universe that simply wants to punish you for trying to grow.
Far from it.
You are the architect of your experience, operating within a highly logical, highly responsive system.
You are both the architect and the observer.
The hurdles, the infuriating frustrations, the sudden manufactured crises, and those overwhelming, paralyzing fears right at the finish line, they are merely the death throes of an outdated version of yourself. They are the blind intelligence, the deeply worn grooves of your past, trying desperately to hold on to a reality you have already outgrown.
If we were to offer a final, universal reflection on human mastery, it all comes down to this core truth about shaping your existence. True mastery, the actual ability to bend the fabric of your life, is never, ever about manipulating the external physical plane through sheer force.
You can't just muscle your way through.
You cannot force the external world to change through frantic physical exertion while your internal state remains chaotic, reactive, and tethered to the past.
You cannot paint over a foundation of rot and expect the house to withstand a storm.
Precisely. True mastery is an internal shifting of such profound magnitude that you are no longer emotionally dependent upon seeing reality change.
That is the linchpin right there. No longer emotionally dependent on seeing reality change. You have generated the state internally, independent of the external evidence.
When you achieve this profound equilibrium, when you are entirely whole, entirely sovereign, radiating your chosen frequency with or without the external world validating it, you step into a realm of infinite potential.
Because you don't need the proof anymore.
When you no longer need the physical world to prove to you that you are safe or abundant or loved because you have generated the chemical and energetic reality of those states internally, the physical world has no choice but to reflect that completeness back to you. You become a stable mirror that reality must match, rather than a fragmented glass reflecting the chaos of reality.
You command your internal weather. You dictate the climate of your own mind, and eventually the external environment bends to match your atmosphere. It's the ultimate liberation from the invisible tether. You stop trying to violently break the handcuffs, and you realize you have held the key in your own pocket the entire time.
The phantom only possesses power as long as you provide the attention, the biological reaction, and the emotional resonance it requires to live. Withdraw the currency, master the pause, and the phantom fades into absolute nothingness.
Which leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought. Something I really want you, the listener, to mull over long after the audio fades on this conversation. We have spent this time mapping out the architecture of your past and understanding how a coalesced entity of outdated thoughts and emotions can become an incredibly formidable, almost terrifying opponent.
A true adversary.
But think about the sheer, staggering creative power that implies. If the strongest adversary you have ever faced, the unseen force that has held you back, sabotaged your greatest dreams, and orchestrated absolute chaos in your life, is simply an unconscious, accidental echo of your own past thoughts, what magnificent, boundless, world-altering entities might you give birth to once you consciously govern the empire of your mind?
The potential is truly beyond measurement. The exact same biological and energetic mechanisms that built the Phantom can be consciously directed to build a Titan.
Exactly. You are standing on that precipice right now. The wind is howling, the resistance is screaming, the anxiety is spiking, but you know now with absolute certainty that it is just the ghost of who you used to be. The step forward is yours to take. Take the step. Let the legacy code shatter, let the ghost fade.